Right, we're live and welcome. Salam, shalom, hello everyone. Thank you, Imam Abdullah, Rabbi Michael, Randy, for joining us today in this conversation entitled Israeli-Palestinian Peace.
Right, we're live
and how can we make it a reality? To give a bit of a background, according to the UN Resolution 2250, young people must be not only included in peace processes and peace negotiations, but also be the ones leading this peace meetings and peace negotiations. So with that in mind, and with an ambition to be a network that will unite UN Youth Delegates for a peaceful and sustainable future, we're hosting the second Peace Talk to discuss interfaith peace and to ask our speakers how we can make it a reality together. We believe that it's important that such peace conversations are youth-led, because young people are our future and present. So here we are, and hopefully we will have a very fruitful conversation. And before, my name is Lika Torikashvili, and together with Ramiz Bakhtiar, I'm one of the founders of this network. And before I introduce our distinguished speakers who do outstanding work for peace building, I would like to introduce my colleague and a good friend of mine, co-founder of this network, Ramiz Bakhtiar. One of the reasons why this network is unique and different is because it's led by a Jew and a Muslim, and we're very proud of our friendship. And I'm really happy that today my friend Ramiz is here with us. Ramiz, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lika. Welcome, Michael, Abdullah, and Randy to our program, and also welcome to those who are watching us live. I'm originally from Afghanistan, but I'm currently based in Canada for more than 3 years now. In 2018, I traveled to New York for the first time as Afghan youth representative to the United Nations, where I met diplomats and UN ambassadors, but most importantly, wonderful young people who were representing their countries as UN Youth Delegates to the United Nations. And, I was fortunate to also meet Lika, who represented Georgia at the UN, and then we continued our discussion about topics that were important to us, including, I remember our first conversation, it was about how it's possible to change people's behavior. And it's because I told Lika that I was working for a strategic communications firm in Afghanistan that was working for development through social and behavioral change. And she immediately asked me, is it really possible to change people's behavior? And I said, yes. And because I believe in that, it's possible to change people's mindset, to change people's behavior for betterment. Unfortunately, a lot of young people are vulnerable to exploitation, and they're brainwashed. But it's important to understand that it's possible to change people's behavior for better, and people's mindset for better, and the behavior of communities for better. And so why, Lika said a few words about our network. This network is a global organization. We operate in different countries. We partner with youth organizations and individuals. And the question that I think I'll answer to provide as much information as possible is, why do we do this work? Why do we do peace work? First of all, for me, it's very personal. And secondly, it's collective. It's personal because I was born and raised in a war-torn country, Afghanistan. My childhood was affected by war, by violence and conflict. And a lot of other social problems, but most importantly, war. And it's not only me, there are millions of Afghans who lost their childhood because of war. who are seriously affected because of violence and war. And secondly, it's personal because I remember when I was going to school, we used to get engaged in physical fight too often with other young people, and including myself. And it's because we didn't know that there were other ways to deal with our conflicts. And that's why there is war in Afghanistan. That's why there is largely war in the world. Dealing with conflict by violence and force and more hatred is one of the ways to deal with conflict. There are a lot of other ways to deal with conflict. And that is exactly what we're teaching students at schools through our project Peace in Our Schools in different countries. That violence is not the only way to deal with conflict. It's the one of those. But there are a lot of other productive and healthy ways to deal with conflict. That's why we do this for me on a personal level. On a collective level, as an organization, it's because we know that there is a problem in the world. The world is facing a serious problem, and it's hate, conflict, war, and violence. And we need to have a response for that. And we are not stuck without an answer to that problem. Our answer to the problem is to try to teach children and young people how to deal with conflict in a productive way. Because it's impossible to avoid conflict. To avoid conflict, it only gets bigger. But it's important to learn how we deal with our conflict. And why we work with young people? Because young people will be the leaders of tomorrow. They are the leaders of today. They're not directly decision makers, but they will be decision makers. So it's important that they're able to work with each other despite their differences and despite the differences of opinions that they have. Because those differences will always be there. And that's why we have been able to work together. I'm from Afghanistan and I'm a Muslim. Lika is from Georgia and she's a Jewish. And we have a lot of differences. But we have a lot of similarities. And I think to focus on what we share is so much more powerful than focusing on what we're not sharing. So that's very important. And I read a quote, and I think one of our friends also mentioned in a meeting, is that it's impossible to hate someone that you know. And that's why I think interfaith friendship, bringing communities together, individuals together from different religious backgrounds, to know each other, to work with each other, is very important in order to address hate. Because people who hate usually have a very, very narrow worldview. And we need to expand that. Probably it's because there's lack of critical thinking or lack of engagement with people from other backgrounds and other beliefs. So that's also critically important, and I think it deeply impacted the two of us as well by understanding our backgrounds, sharing our story. And that's why we're doing the same work with a bunch of other people. We just completed our project, first round of our project, Peace in Our Schools. I know I'm running out of time. In Bosnia and in Georgia, and we work with, I think, 9 schools and roughly 500 students. And it was a fantastic experience. Happy to share more about it. But I will end with this, and I would really love to hear from Michael and from Abdullah and from Randy, their perspectives and their solutions to the problem.
Thank you, Ramiz. Thank you for this very heartwarming message. Yes, there are peace meetings happening, and there are interfaith meetings happening, and there are rabbis meeting with imams, but rarely, very rarely, this is youth-led and youth-facilitated. So we here would like to change the status quo and would like to offer a different possibility. So one of the reasons and one of the hopes from this meeting, after this meeting, is that not only we will discuss very important questions collected from young people, but you, Michael, Randy, and Abdullah will also form relationships and hopefully friendships and partnerships that will last way beyond this call. So that is the hope, and hopefully we will be able to achieve that by the end of this conversation. And with that, I would like to introduce our dear speakers, Rabbi Michael Cohen, Imam Abdullah Antepli, and Randall Friend, who is a diplomatic corps at the World Jewish Congress. So I would like to start with Rabbi Michael Cohen, because I had a pleasure of being his student at Bennington College. Michael Cohen is a visiting faculty member at Bennington College's Center for the Advancement of Public Action, as well as a faculty member at the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies in Kibbutz Keturah, Israel. Since 2000, he has divided his time between Vermont and Kibbutz Keturah, teaching classes on conflict resolution and different aspects of biblical studies. Rabbi Michael is a longtime environmental activist and has written extensively on the impact of ecological issues on the Middle East peace process. Imam Abdullah Antepli is an associate professor at the practice of interfaith relations at Duke University Sanford School of Public Policy. He's a leader of cross-religious and cross-cultural dialogue in American higher education and in the nonprofit world. He has built multiple organizations and initiatives to facilitate a religious and spiritual life across America's college campuses, sowing seeds of understanding between religions. Imam Abdullah is a senior fellow on Jewish-Muslim relations at Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, where he co-directs the Muslim Leadership Initiative. The nonprofit Times recognized Imam Antepli as one of their Power and Influence top 50 leaders of 2019, calling him one of the most prominent Muslim leaders in higher education today. And last but not the least, Randall Friend. Randy is a Jewish communal professional based in Los Angeles. Randy is the director of philanthropic engagement and communications at SADC America. For the past 20 years, Randy has also been engaged in Jewish education as an educator for teens and adults, working for a number of the most notable synagogues in Los Angeles. He has spent the past 13 years teaching Holocaust history and the Jewish history of Poland. And Randy is also involved in local politics and community outreach. He is currently an elected official in the city of Los Angeles. Very, very interesting speakers, and hopefully a very engaging conversation on peace building and youth engagement. So with that, I would like to start with the first question, and this one is to Imam Abdullah and to Rabbi Michael. As you all know, we recently celebrated one of the holiest holidays in Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. It is a very special day when we ask for forgiveness, we pray for our sins, and we hope to be written in the book of life. And myself, as I was reading the prayers, I would come across the word peace very often. We pray for peace of mind. We pray for peace in our hearts. We pray for peace for our people. And this really got me thinking that Judaism and Islam both are teaching peace, and both are teaching us to love the other. How does this become misinterpreted? Why do people misinterpret this? And how Judaism and Islam teaches peace? If you could, this is a broad question, but if you could give your thoughts and comments on the notion of peace through religion, maybe we can start with you, Rabbi Michael, and then Imam Abdullah.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for being here, all who I see here on Zoom, and those people out in the YouTube world, which I don't see who you are. So welcome. Thank you. I want to start first with this whole concept of peace, in the word in both Hebrew and in Arabic, shalom and salam. So when we think about peace, we think, the end of violence. And once the violence is over, all the troubles go away. And there's a much deeper understanding, both in Hebrew and in Arabic, which are often based upon these three-letter roots. So in the Hebrew, it's the shin lamed mem, which means shalem, to be whole and complete. And I believe it's the same in Arabic. Imam Abdullah, please let me know when you talk. That peace, the cessation of violence, is just the first step. And after that, that allows us, because the violence is not there anymore, the end of the violence then allows us to work on creating both whole and complete communities, as well as whole and complete individuals. And sometimes, while I think peace gets a bad name, certainly both in Israel and Palestine with young people, it's this misunderstanding, we're going to have peace, the violence is going to end, and everything's going to be all taken care of. And that's actually not the process. Peace as end of violence is the first step. And then afterwards, we work at making ourselves and our lives and our communities and relationships more whole and complete. There's a wonderful, very important conflict resolution theorist, Galtung, and he says, too often we focus on the violence, and he calls that negative peace. And he says, we need to focus on cultural violence, structural violence, and he calls that positive peace. And that's really, in some ways, those are the two parts of peace, the end of violence, and peace, shalom, and then the salam, shalem, working for wholeness. And I think that's what we need to remind ourselves of. It's a long engagement. And I'll give one example here, and allow for Imam to talk. So in the Tyrol of Italy, up until World War I, that was part of Austria. 100 years ago, it was given to Italy at the end of World War I. We go to the Tyrol today, it's the Dolomites, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. There's still a lot of German spoken there. There's still a lot of German food there, German clothing. And it wasn't that long ago that Italy had to come up with an agreement to allow for those voices to feel freer in how they express themselves. That's 100 years after the conflict ended. And I think we need to understand that once, there is a peace in terms of the end of violence, that's only the beginning of the real work. That's only the beginning of the real work. And in many ways, religions can help guide us once we reach that point. Imam.
Thank you, beautiful, Rabbi Cohen. Every time I listen to you, I learn incredible new insights. I would like to start by maybe, Lika, questioning the premise of the question itself. It would be at least incomplete to say Judaism, Islam, or any other religion, they only teach peace. Or if something is innately good and good for humanity, that's within our religion. But if something is bad and source of violence, that's not part of our religion. I don't know if that will be an accurate comparison, because anything and everything about our religions are human. These are divinely revealed religions, but it manifested in human experience. As violence and peace, as good and evil are part of human nature, these elements exist within our tradition. I invite at least myself and others to consider inviting themselves to see religion's role in nurturing the good in people and disciplining and taming and putting the evil in people in shackles. There's a wonderful Native American parable or story. A Native American chief calls these young teenagers and says them, there are two wolves, W-O-L-F, in you. One is a good wolf, one is an evil wolf. And in each and every one of you, these wolves will be fighting all the time. And the teenagers immediately ask, which wolf will win? Which of these internal, good or evil, will win? And the Native American chief famously says, whichever you feed. whichever you nurture, whichever you empower, whichever you feed. Similarly, we have to make Islam and Judaism and Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism to nurture and empower the good wolf in us. But we have to be cognizant that it could also feed the evil wolf and nurture the evil wolf. That is also part of human experience. That is also part of our tradition as well. We cannot divorce ourselves from the responsibility that religion can and has been source of violence and other horrible things as well. The second thing I would like to say is, I think Rabbi Cohen sort of implied beautifully, neither peace nor any other values in Judaism and Islam rarely told as a switch on and off instant thing. It is always invitation to a lifestyle. It is always invitation into changing your individual and collective life, designing a moral society that will live peace, pursue peace, persist in looking for peace. So you are not peaceful now, you turn the switch on and you become peaceful. That's not how it works. You don't become merciful. You don't become forgiving people. You don't become gracious just instantly. Their life, especially Judaism and Islam, by demanding certain lifestyles, by turning religion and religious experience into a way of life, they invite you to pursuer of peace, seeker of peace, researchers of peace, not just being peaceful or defining peace as an end of violence or the end of war, etc. So I really hope we will take this human responsibility and make our religion to force us to nurture the goodness and the peace to flourish in our societies. And we will also work with our religious traditions. Those elements that can be source of hate will be under quarantine and under shackles.
Thank you, Imam, and thank you, Rabbi. Definitely, there are a lot of different approaches to this question, and I'll be very interested to dive deeper into the misinterpretation of religion, which, Michael, you put it really well in your Jerusalem Post article, which we'll get to later on. But I would like to ask a question to Randy now, and hopefully we can come back to this conversation. Randy, you recorded very recently a podcast on anti-Semitism education, and you are for the last 13 years you've been teaching Holocaust education to teens and adults, and obviously education plays a huge part in this piece. What we teach our children is very, very important. And I'm wondering, what is your opinion on how can we work with anti-Semitism? How can we work with anti-Semites? And there is a reason why I'm asking you this question, but I will leave it open-ended and ask you for your opinion on this.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this important conversation. I think I want to call back first to what Ramiz said, which is this idea of knowing someone. It's hard to hate someone that you know. If you break bread with someone, it's hard to put them in the picture of they're less than human or they're something other than human. And so education is a big part of teaching anti-Semitism, but moreover, I think is about learning about the individual. And in how we teach Holocaust history, how even you can see education in the United States around issues of, if we're learning about the civil rights movement, learning about slavery, it becomes far more impactful when you can learn the story of one person's experience, versus this big number, 6 million Jews murdered during the Shoah, or if we pick certain pieces of that history and say, well, 10,000 were murdered here, or 18,000 were murdered during the Harvest Festival one day in Lublin at Majdanek. Those numbers wash over us. And so I think part of it is we have to start getting better at telling a personal narrative of what happened to one person, right? It's not a coincidence, I think, that the diary of Anne Frank is read all over America because it's the story of one young girl's experience. That's number one. Number two, I think it is actually in listening. I think that we have to meet people where they are, which ties into peace. We have to, in order to bring someone along with us, we have to meet them where they are. We have to understand their perspective. It doesn't mean necessarily even that we agree. Right? There are certainly conversations over the years where I have engaged in or attempted to engage, and I realized very quickly that the person I'm attempting to engage with actually isn't interested in engaging for the sake of understanding or learning or finding a common ground. And there's this great, to borrow the hat of the rabbi for a moment, there's a great story between Hillel and Shammai, these two great rabbis who are constantly at odds usually, right? If one says, I go right, the other says go left. And there's this lovely midrash that says one day they bring an argument before God. And so Shammai is asked, okay, so what's your take on the situation? And Shammai says, well, Hillel is completely wrong. Let's just start right there. And then presents his case. And God says, okay, Hillel, what's your position? Hillel then very beautifully explains Shammai's position and then explains his own position and says, it's up to you. And God says Hillel's right. The question is why? And the rabbis answer that it's because Hillel held space for the opposing view. There was a place for it. And I think so often in combating anti-Semitism and bigotry and hate, so much of it comes out of ignorance, so much of it comes out of not understanding. But frankly, at a very, very basic level, we're not listening to each other. We're not even getting to the point of discussing the details of why anti-Semitism, why is it bad, what does it mean, how is it today versus 50 years ago versus 100 years ago, and so on. So I think that's the first step. The first step is to try to find those people that are willing to stand up or at least engage in a conversation.
Definitely. You cannot hate someone you know. You cannot hate someone you know. Very powerful words, and I'm glad that Ramiz brought it up. And the reason I would like to, I wanted to ask this question, Randy, is because of a very powerful article by Yair Rosenberg about a recovering anti-Semite and about his favorite anti-Semite, which the article is about Imam Abdullah, and about Imam Abdullah's story. And I found this article very powerful. And in the article, Imam Yair Rosenberg tells your story of growing up in Turkey. And I'm reading a section of the article actually. Antepli was a proud card-carrying anti-Semite. One of the first books he remembers receiving was a children's adaptation of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, the influential anti-Jewish forgery that supports to record the meetings of a global Jewish conspiracy. I was filled with rage. That's what you said about reading this literature. Why I asked Randy about working with anti-Semites is exactly the reason why we all find Ramiz's quote about not being able to hate someone you know so powerful, because only through getting to know the other person and only through learning about the other story is how we learn about the truth and how we learn not to hate. And Imam, in our first call, I actually recorded this and wrote it down because it was so powerful. You said we need to make journeys into each other's worlds. And this is a very, very powerful sentence, because that's exactly what we need to do. But how do we do that? How do we inspire young people who are full of rage, who are very, very angry, who see the social media posts, who see the social media pictures, who are fueled to fight? How do we inspire these young people to make journeys into each other's worlds? And what inspired you to make this journey, and how did you start your transformation? If you could tell us a little bit about your.
Thanks, Lika, and very kind. Maybe you can share the link to Yair's article, which was a gift, because we had that conversation with Yair, this journalist from Forward and Atlantic, 2 years ago. And then on a Yom Kippur Eve, he just sent me the article based on those conversations. He developed a beautiful Devorah Torah, a sermon, a khutbah on forgiveness. It's really beautiful. Thank you. And I am really grateful that I recovered. I am grateful that love, God of love, didn't allow me to live with that rage and with that poison, and put me in a journey that enabled me to take that poison out of my system. It doesn't, I think, how can we, you are asking a $1 million question. One of the greatest mystery is God's multiplicity of creation. I think one size will not fit all. But what worked for me was becoming Muslim, becoming religious. I was lucky that my initial teachers who taught me Islam, who put the love of Allah and love of Prophet into my heart, they were not necessarily Jew-loving people, but they were so focused on building and establishing a moral dashboard, teaching mainstream Muslim theology, mainstream Quran, before you learn any law, anything else, that what is central to Islam is to love God and take that vertical love of God and manifest it in a horizontal level, loving humanity and creation. And that religiosity opened my eyes with the morals and ethics that's being taught by my early teachers of Islam and Quran. But all the poison that I have received and swallowed prior to this, I just couldn't reconcile, because my moral dashboard was giving all sorts of alarms. Meaning, if you hold on to these values that your religion is teaching, you can't hold on to this poison. You can't hold on to hating people. And also the way in which Islamic history was taught to me. Like in the anti-Semitic literature, the way the Jewish-Muslim relation historically is presented as nothing but a fraud. We were in each other's throat all the time. Jews betrayed Prophet, and they killed their own prophets, etc. A very selective and manipulative, deceitful way of teaching religious history. And then I found out that Muhammad had good relationship, the Prophet of Islam had very good relationship with many, many different Jewish tribes. He married 2 Jewish women. One of them converted to Islam, another one didn't convert. Prophet Muhammad attended Shabbat dinners, had Jewish in-laws, ate kosher food. Of course, hate rewrites human history and takes all the good stuff out and puts all the poisonous and toxic lies and deceitful material out there. So what worked for me is engaging with Islam and Muslim through its enlightened mainstream theology and history. As I became more religious, as I became more devout, as I wanted this religion of Islam to be the path to God and anything good in my life, I just couldn't remain anti-Semite, because all those religious values was in direct conflict and direct confrontation with the hate that I have swallowed. I will never forget, just to give you a picture of that rage, in my anti-Semitic years, I would see a visibly Jewish person in front of Cortel, Western Wall, praying, and I would be filled with rage, because that picture, anything and everything visible Jewish, was source of my people's suffering. Muslim civilizations collapsed because they were behind anything and everything. And then as I became religious, I just paid attention to the prayers that these devout, pious Jews are saying in front of the Western Wall. And as a religious Muslim, seeing how beautifully they are chanting God's name, how so masterfully and majestically they are glorifying Allah's name, with the same God that, as I believe, that they are revering the same God and showing respect to the same Almighty. As a religious Muslim, I was filled with shame. I was filled with incredible amount of guilt that something so purely innocent and prayerful and glorifying God's name was evoking and invoking intense hate and rage in my life, which again forced me, like as I said earlier, salam is not a thing but a process. Tawbah and teshuvah and regret, atonement, forgiveness is also the same. Since then, I have been running. I have taken the nearest exit and running in the opposite direction. But again, my forgiveness still continues. That's why I always introduce myself as a recovering anti-Semite, not a recovered, because all those years of hate requires a lifelong commitment to ask forgiveness, promote understanding, build bridges, so that no more Abdullahs in young age will be poisoned with the same level of hate and bigotry and all sorts of potential violence.
Thank you, Imam Abdullah, and very powerful to hear all this in this conversation. And now the other side of this question, one side is your story, and the other side is the response to your story. And with this, I would like to go back to Randy and to Rabbi Michael. A question on giving a chance, a question on forgiveness, a question on forgiveness right after Yom Kippur, which is good timing. How Yair in the article mentions this question: how many other Anteplis are there, and how many other people are there who might have learned from their mistakes, but they're no longer allowed to. And he refers to the fact that in the time when you, Abdullah, joined the anti-Semitic rallies, there was no social media. And maybe those scenes or statements are not recorded. But today we live in a world where whatever you say, whatever you write, all of that is carefully saved in the internet, and you can easily have access to it, and you can easily use that to fuel more hate, which is what both sides do with all the images, with all the statements. It's very problematic because again and again, it fuels hatred from the youth, from the students, from my friends, from people our age, and then it becomes really hard to control. So how many Abdullahs are out there that could have learned and could have fought this hatred, but maybe we're not giving them a chance? How can we as Jewish people learn to have this dialogue and forgive? Because it is a problem on this side as well. I really don't like talking in terms of sides. I am wearing a t-shirt which is black and white, which is kind of the representation of this. But how can we learn, and how can we teach our children, and how can we adapt to this new mindset of forgiveness, of being able to sit down and talk to someone who thinks very differently than us? Maybe to Randy, and then Rabbi Michael, to you.
It's a great question. I think the first and foremost is to remember that we too aren't perfect. I can speak from example, in the United States, there's the Black Lives Matter, which for the Jewish community in the United States, there are disagreements depending on which pocket of the Jewish community you're talking to. One will say they're all anti-Semitic because the founders of the movement had written something that was anti-Semitic at one point. Some maybe yes, maybe no, hold less than favoring, less than wonderful views of the state of Israel. And some people say, well, let's just throw anyone who holds up a BLM sign, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I take the position of, well, maybe there are for sure anti-Semites there because there's anti-Semites everywhere. But maybe there are other people who we can engage with. And I don't believe that we should cancel people. And I think we have to be very, right, as it says in Pirkei Avot, the rabbi will check me in a minute, we have to be prudent in our judgment. And we really have to, I think, stop and assess if someone has made a comment that's anti-Semitic, what is really gained by our community if we, scream from the rooftop to have a person, let's say, completely canceled, right? Personally, I don't believe in cancel culture because I don't think that it furthers the cause. If somebody's a rabid anti-Semitic and they are non-apologetic for it, okay, great. Let's see if we can, minimize that voice. But if they are saying something that is anti-Semitic because of ignorance because of whatever the motivation is, they had a bad experience with someone who's Jewish, whatever it may be, if there is even a crack in the veneer that they're willing to, that there's a pause where they're willing to be open and think and be reflective about what they said, I think it's actually incumbent upon us to dig in and dig deep with that person and try to come to a new understanding. Why did you have those opinions? Can we talk about it? Can we explore how maybe that's not right, not the right view? I believe we have to forgive people because the truth is that there is bigotry and hate that exists within the Jewish community going outwards. And something that I find myself oftentimes talking about, Rabbi will check me again, is sinat chinam, this idea of causeless hatred. We as Jews, just like Muslims, just like Christians, just like you name the religious point of view, we're human and we argue amongst ourselves. And so I think it's very important that where we can find opportunities to forgive and then create, basically through that process, we're creating new allies. It's very important.
Thank you, Randy. This notion of meeting the other, I just want to talk about some of the work that I do with the Arava Institute and go a little bit deeper. So the Arava Institute, we bring together, our student body is 1/3 Israeli-Jewish, 1/3 Arab, meaning Palestinian citizens of the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinian citizens of Israel, Jordanians, Moroccans, and then 1/3 the rest of the world. And the camel in the tent, there's clearly the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. And we have spaces where they can say some of the most difficult things to each other. Very, very powerful, very, very painful. People will leave those sessions screaming and angry, and an hour later they'll be having dinner together and laughing. And part of that is because if you bring people in conflict together over this, you can't build a relationship. This actually hurts. But if you have other touch points, which is what we have there, they're taking classes together, they're hiking together, they're sharing their different foods together, they're sharing their different religious holidays together, and that they get to really meet the other as Muhammad's not just a Palestinian, Muhammad is this human being. Shulamit is not just an Israeli Jew, she's this human being. And so there are models out there that exist, and we need to amplify for people that these are places to go. In terms of the specific Jewish question here, it was very interesting when the Holocaust Museum, I'm going to say something a little bit provocative here. When the Holocaust Museum was being built in Washington, Jerzy Kosinski, the great author who had gone through the show and wrote memoirs about it, he was against it. He said it's going to reinforce both for Jew and non-Jew the notion of Jew as victim. And what's interesting, that museum is built on kind of the mall of Washington, D.C. by Capitol Hill and the White House. It's kind of the holy, holy ground of the United States. And what's interesting, when the African-American community and the Native American community built their museums, it was about the good, the bad, and the ugly of their experiences, the totality of it. The one museum we have is about victimhood. And I think one of the reasons why we see this uptick, it's not the only reason at all, and I don't want to simplify this, but it's a piece of the puzzle, I think. This uptick in anti-Semitic activities in the last couple of years is we forgot to teach people about Jews and what is Judaism? What does it mean to be a Jewish person? We just talked about don't do the Holocaust again, which is incredibly important. But I think we forgot that other piece of humanizing that other that people have hated for so long. And I think that's part of the tikkun, the repair that we need to get better at doing as well in terms of this particular hate in the world.
Thank you, Michael and Randy. And going back to you, Imam Abdullah, same question actually to you on giving a chance and forgiveness. I'm wondering from the standpoint of Islam, how can we interpret this notion of forgiveness, and how can we better prepare Jews and better prepare our colleagues to be more forgiving and more accepting? Because even me talking from my own perspective as a member of a Jewish community, not all of my friends agree with how I see this peace approach. Just as not all members of your community, Imam, not all Muslims and not all young Muslims agree that we should be having this peace conversation today. So how do we, how from your point of view, how can we...
I am loving your $1 million how questions, Lika, and I'm hoping Ramiz also at some point will join the conversation and ask a few more questions from his angle. I have a personal experience. If nobody recovers from anti-Semitism, it was me. I did hope I made a very clear point of my rage and my intense hate. So the fact that I recovered, that means everybody can. So Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and all religions, they really try to ingrain that sense of first being critical to yourself and giving benefit of the doubt to other people. You guys were all in the Yom Kippur services. Ramiz, have you ever been to a Yom Kippur service in a synagogue? Oh, you should go next year. That's a sin. As part of the services, as they ask forgiveness, everybody beat their chest. And they recant their sins and mistakes over the last year, and then they ask forgiveness and beat their chest. Nobody goes around and beat the chest of the person on the right and beat the chest of the person on the left. So we have to cultivate, and Islam does the same. Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, they all have say in terms of before you throw stones at anybody, look yourself in the mirror. Are you better than them? And if you approach with that sense of grace and openness, and as Randy beautifully said, meet people where they are, and try to find out, well, what are those blind spots? Another good example from the ancient Greek Stoics, they teach us if a blind person while walking would hit the vase and hit the dinner table and cause a whole havoc. The plates are flying, the flower basket is done, the glasses are broken. You wouldn't get angry to that blind person because he doesn't see. He can't see. Therefore, for him to hit and break down things is understandable. But in the same way, people are not literally maybe blind, but they have blind spots. Certain aspect of their ability to see the ugliness of hate and prejudice is not developed. And therefore, our initial reaction is to not immortalize that mistake, not immortalize that. That's why Yair wrote that article. If there was cell phones, and if there was taking pictures when I was burning Israeli flags, if that was written and sort of immortalized, I don't think I will ever get a chance. I would have ever got a chance to recover and be in service of bridge building and peacemaking. So cultivating grace, cultivating self-criticism, cultivating paying attention to your own shortcomings first, and cultivating forgiveness is the way to go, my friend.
Very beautiful example of our Yom Kippur tradition. I will, Ramiz, over to you. Ramiz, the question, and then we'll continue.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned a lot because I'm not a scholar at all, and I'm particularly not a Muslim scholar. So I have very limited knowledge. That's why I really listen carefully to learn from you, Abdullah and Michael. From my perspective, so we are peace builders by practice, by activism. And so we organize peace conversations, and we do that because we think and we believe that by dialogue, by bringing people together to discuss different difficult issues, we are providing the opportunity to find a common ground. But we see that our world is becoming less and less peaceful, despite a lot of peace agreements being signed in the past 2 decades, which research show has been more than 900. The most recent example is a peace agreement to end the war in Afghanistan that led to actually a never-ending war, and more violence, and more restrictions, and more problems. As a result of which, the only Jew left Afghanistan a few months ago. There were once more, I think around 50,000 Jews in Afghanistan, but the only Jew left in Afghanistan, Zablon, left a few weeks ago because he had to, which is unfortunate. And so now the question is, there are a lot of peace talks and peace dialogues and negotiations and peace agreements, but we see less peace in the world. And we see a lot of divides and a lot of confrontations and hatred, mainly online. So my question is, how we can make dialogues and conversations to work, mainly between groups that have a conflict between each other. I think one reason that dialogues do not give an outcome or a result is because it's not rational to expect a quick outcome from a dialogue, from a conversation. And it takes time. It needs a lot of patience and a lot of energy. But what is really missing? I think what is really missing is because a lot of those discussions and dialogues do not have a purpose. There is a conversation, but there is no purpose. I think the purpose should be to find a common ground, to find a solution that is a win-win solution for parties that have a conflict but are having a dialogue, a conversation. What do you think are the gaps missing? Are the reasons why these peace dialogues, these peace negotiations that are going on for years and years and years are actually not producing any results? But I mean, they might be producing results, but not tangible results. And not certainly results compared to how the problem is growing. So how these dialogues and conversations, peace meetings, and negotiations can actually produce results that are not smaller than the scale that the problem is growing.
Can I piggyback on that for just a second? I think Ramiz says something very, very important. And again, I'm falling back on my work at the Arava Institute, which I say we see these amazing long-term personal professional relations coming out of this program between Israelis and Palestinians, Jordanians and others. And I don't want to go into the details of it, but, and I often speak about, there's like 5 pieces that we have put in place. It's about intentionality. It's not that we can't, it's not just about bringing people in conflict together, but what's the setting? How long are they going to talk for? What are they meeting about? There's a whole slew of things that we really need to think through when we're bringing people together who are in conflict, so that we have the best opportunity for the best results. And that's something that we have to really think through if we want to have the results that we want to have.
I think there's 2 parts. And Ramiz, I think you bring up some great questions, and hopefully my answer will include at least one of a few takeaways from today's meeting. The first is a basic concept that as government bodies negotiate and we talk about peace treaties and agreements and trade agreements, that's great at a legislative level, right? And I always support more peace agreements. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see the Abraham Accords grow and see more countries joining in terms of Israel and the rest of the Levant. However, it's very challenging, frankly impossible, to legislate away hate. You can't legislate who you should like, who you should not like, and actually have a peace on the street, which I think is what you're referring to. And I think that one of the things that is missing is actually even the organizations that are organizing these initial conversations is, are you giving that person with whom you are in conflict with a seat at the table that's driving the other organization? In other words, if you have the World Jewish Congress, do we have members, so if we're referring to like the North America section, do we have members of the Black community on our board? Do we have members of the Muslim community on our board? So that way their voice, not just like, hey, let's meet for an iftar and have a shared cultural experience and feel good about it, but then we're both going to go walking in the opposite directions. But actually saying, no, not only will we have you at an iftar, I would love to sit down with you from a policy point of view as an organization and just hear your point of view as we as a Jewish organization look at things, so that you're providing this real-time feedback and sounding board, and vice versa. I would say to any Islamic organization, I would say if part of your intent is to create peace with Jews, how many Jews are sitting in with you at a board meeting or at a committee level to help, just to listen, not that they're steering the ship, right? But that they're a voice at the table. I think oftentimes when we talk about conflict, we forget to ask ourselves whose voice is missing from around the table. And I think that before we even, those next steps are where are the organizations where we can try to plug in someone from the other side.
Wonderful. If I may add a few more flaws of these well-meaning, light-hearted, good-intentioned meetings, they end up, I fully share your heartaches, Ramiz. They end up not producing as much. They end up, at best, spending a good time with the like-minded people, but it doesn't turn into a policy. It doesn't change things on the ground. If I may list a few quick things, because we have a lot more questions to go through. One, a lot of these meetings are designed to be one-off. You can't fix decades-long problem in making with one event or two events. Nothing that has not built around building deeper relationship and focusing to sustain those relationships and walking longer journeys with a vision and mission that brings people over and over together again, that can only produce something. Otherwise, with one ceremony, with one bringing rabbis, imams, and pastors together, what can you achieve? Secondly, they are intellectually very weak. Often when these meetings happen, they focus on very low-hanging fruits, very toothless, fluffy kumbaya stuff. They explore commonalities as if what makes us who we are is not only our commonalities, what we share. Those are fine, but ultimately what makes us who we are is our differences, our particularisms, our unique expressions of our values. And therefore, many of them intentionally avoid talking about what divides us, what is different between us. So any gathering of peace that doesn't primarily explore those differences and divisive issues, stumbling blocks, and turn those differences into a source of understanding and celebration, only remaining in the superficial level of what is similar, what we share in common, halal chicken, kosher chicken, our father Abraham, and that just ending there. Giving one example about the Jewish-Muslim relations, if you look a lot of the Jewish-Muslim dialogue efforts, they never talk about Israel-Palestine. They never talk about the conflict in the Middle East. They never talk about those deeply ethical, moral issues that actually divides us in the beginning. So any Jewish-Muslim relations, you may not start with that topic, but it's not aiming to bring the level of relationship and conversation to a sufficient level of health and sophistication and strength that you can actually talk about Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In my mind, at least at its best, it's a waste of time. At its worst, it is only furthering than fueling the fire. And therefore, we should design peace conferences, dialogues, and engagements. At least the same amount of time should be spent to what actually divides us in the first place. What are we different? Starting from Isaac and Ishmael, which son was slaughtered, all the way to our own selective understanding of history and unfolding of Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Middle East.
Imam Abdullah, thank you. Actually, in one of your interviews, I really loved how you referred to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the fact that we don't discuss it enough in these meetings as an elephant in the room. Everyone knows that there is that topic. Everyone kind of has it in the back of their minds, but for some reason it is not addressed as much as it should be, because everyone is being cautious and careful, and it's understandable, but at the same time we have to be talking about it. At the same time, Michael, the notion of negative and positive peace by John Galtung, which we discussed in our classes on many occasions, and which stayed in my head obviously for years to come, very important. And the grassroots peace building at the same time, parallel to the diplomatic visits, just like you, Randy, were a part of to a diplomatic visit in the United Arab Emirates, to go in parallel. I guess that would be the ideal outcome. But we're running out of time, and there are two more questions that I really hope we'll have time for. Question that is brought up by many youths and is problematic for a lot of young people in different parts of the world, religious or non-religious, is one of the problems that is caused by religion, the misuse of religion, when religion becomes a part of the conflict. And to unpack this question, I'm actually referring to your article, Michael, in the Jerusalem Post, because there is a powerful reference to the misuse of religion. And I'm quoting, "Both sides deliver too many bad faith messages. The Hamas charter continues to state, Israel will not exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. Repeated Israeli building and land confiscation in West Bank leaves less and less room for a viable Palestinian state. A recent preaching by an imam on Palestinian Authority TV called for the destruction of the tyrannical Jews. Religious Zionist Party chair Bezalel Smotrich told Arab Israeli Knesset members that they are here by mistake because Ben Gurion did not finish the job and throw you out in 1948. Death to Arabs and Muhammad is dead were chanted last month by Jewish participants during the Jerusalem Day March through the Arab quarter of Jerusalem's old city." There are tensions. There are tensions caused because of the misuse of religion, and this happens repeatedly on both sides. And this complicates the whole peace initiative, but also complicates the already existing tensions. This becomes even more dangerous when young people are part of the conversation, when young people become fueled, when young people become emotional, and when young people read this and become a part of this. So, and this is the question to all three of you: how can we manage this, and how can we stop the religious extremists on both sides making false references to the religion? Michael, maybe we can start with you, and then
Sure.
Abdullah and Randy.
So there's a really important show that PBS did a year after 9/11 called Faith and Doubt at Ground Zero. You can Google it and find it. And at one point they deal with this question, why was this a religious act? And they interview a priest, and he's an amazing individual. And he says, before anyone told me, I knew it was religious people who did this. It was such a self-damning indictment of religion by an incredibly religious person about religion in general. And he knew this dark place that religion can go. And so since we're short here on time, I'm just going to go to one aspect of why does that happen too often when it comes to religion? So if we posit, Lord Acton said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If God is the ultimate power in the universe, and if an individual feels they know what that power wants, that can become incredibly corrupting and addictive. And part of the challenge of religion, and all religions have the counter to that, so that we don't go there. And part of the challenge of all religions is cultivating that voice that doesn't allow for the maximalist opinions about things, that doesn't allow for us to be corrupted by this sense of power that we know what the ultimate power in the universe wants. And it's also what we give attention to. It's a much broader question. What makes the news? It's the negative stuff, right? It's not the positive stuff. And how do we break that dialogue, which this is a subset of that larger problem in the world. So I'm not giving an answer, I'm just giving analysis, because I also know we have a limited amount of time here.
Abdullah, you first.
Lika pointed out to you, but happy to. I think some of my initial examples will be apt for this question as well. We have to silence the voices of hate in our tradition through the voices of love. We have to speak louder. We have to work harder. If you look some of those regrettable, shameful religious voices and experiences, how hard these people work, how zealous they are, how committed they are. It's hard not to feel envy, like there's nothing to appreciate about these violent forces. But regretfully, a lot of these fringe violent voices become bigger than their size because the majority of the faith, Muslims, Jews, Christians, they are not as active. They are lazy, sleeping moderates. They are not committed. They can't speak louder than their crazies. And therefore, their crazies draw so much strength, so much grit, so much power from the sleeping majority, moderate, so-called Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The problem is not these people. The problem is the inactivity, the lack of commitment of the majority of these so-called believers. Dr. King, when he was in Birmingham jail, he wrote letters, not to the white supremacists. He wrote letters to these sleeping, moderate, mainstream Protestants saying, you are as guilty, if not more guilty than these white supremacists and the clans and the militias, because look at these people with their small numbers, what they can do, and look at you with all the resources. You are just not acting. You are not putting your money where your mouth is. So there is no easy answer to this question other than how to shake the imagination of the moderate majority, how to wake them up from their troubling slumber, how to make them radical peacemakers, bridge builders, committed individuals to live up to their ethical moral ideals that the religion's teaching is the way to go. And for that, we need prophetic voices, people who will not only speak power to the preaching the choir. It's very easy to be in a liberal congregation, mosque, synagogue, or church, and speak power and take some cheap shots at people who are not in the room. Can you speak to the power to your mainland moderate community? Can you trouble them? That's what prophets do. Can you put the fire of responsibility in their heart, that they may not be guilty of these all sorts of things being done in their religion, but they're responsible to fix it, and therefore they have to work as hard, if not harder, without waking them up. Just individually going after these horrific and disgusting and despicable voices, two of which you quoted, one from Jewish, one from Palestinian, we are not going to solve this problem. The problem is the silent majority. They are in their slumber.
And that is why I wanted Abdullah and the rabbi to speak before me. I agree, and all I would say, the shorthand is right. The silent majority is meaningless, and you have to stand up. It was something actually very impactful in the United Arab Emirates. We were talking about tolerance. The Emirati society, from its founding by Sheikh Zayed, the founder, peace be upon him, really was. Oh, we're getting photobombed by my son. Wait, let Abba finish. Yeah. Go ahead. So, sorry about that. My son's home with a fever. Is that Sheikh Zayed really wanted to create a tolerant society. And so tolerance is, there's a minister of tolerance. And the question was asked, well, how do you combat extremism, right? One of the 9/11 terrorists was, I think two of them were from the Emirates. And this is when the country really turned into and addressed issues of extremism. And there's an organization called Hidayah, which combats extremism throughout the world, but especially focused in the Arab world. And Dr. Ali Nuaimi, who is the head, said very succinctly, stand up, stand up, stand up and join me. Wherever there is hatred, you stand up and you speak out against it. Yes, we need prophetic voices. Yes, we need voices that can speak to the masses. And yes, we need, even when we are around a dinner table and we hear hateful speech with our family and with our friends in our own personal networks, if we hear a racist joke, a bigoted joke, we stop and we say, no, it's actually not okay to make that joke. And I think if we can take even that baby step of combating hateful speech from a religious point of view around a Shabbos table, or that's actually where it starts. And because I think even if in Holocaust education, we talk about, Auschwitz didn't fall from the sky. It started with words, right? Hitler, 20 years in 1919, writes a letter to a gentleman by the name of Adolf Gemlich, talking about using words, talking about what will happen to the Jews. 20 years before World War II officially begins. It starts with words, and so we have to start at the very beginning. As soon as we see it, we have to join together and say it's not allowed. And as the Imam beautifully said, combat the hate with the love.
Thank you, Randy. And to make sure that we finish on time, one last question and 1 minute each, just to quickly reflect on it. Another question of discussion in our network is the fact that it is not easy to not be on a black or a white side, to choose to see that there is no black and white. That is already a more difficult life, because you agree to not join a side or the other side, but you agree to see the true and false in both sides and the right and wrong in both sides. And it is not easy to be a peace builder. It is not easy to choose peace. It is not easy, Imam, for you to say openly that you used to be an anti-Semite and now you understand why dialogue with Jewish people is important. It is not easy for me to say that I work with Muslim colleagues from Afghanistan, in Afghanistan and in Malaysia and in the Philippines and all over the world. So how, Randy, you were a part of a delegation that went to the United Arab Emirates to facilitate the peace negotiations. So how can we be peace builders and do meaningful work despite the judgment from and within our community? And 1 minute each and we'll be over.
I think the short answer is things we gain cheaply, we esteem lightly. And I think that things worth doing is hard work. I think that part of how you combat it by taking one step at a time, right? Nobody eats an elephant in one bite. So it's one step at a time, and it's not a singular conversation or a singular moment, but rather it is, and as I will conclude in saying that I've loved this conversation, and I hope that it is the first of an ongoing conversation and of many conversations, and that we do, as we get to know each other, we do delve into talking about the camel in the tent, as Rabbi Cohen said, and lean into the subjects that are perhaps a little bit more uncomfortable, because it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I think it's just, you have to believe that the world can be better, and we just take one step at a time, day by day, getting a little bit closer.
Thank you, Imam.
Our biggest obstacle in achieving peace is not crazies, not fanatics, not fundamentalists, but two things: despair and apathy. There is no greater sin in Islam and Judaism than hopelessness. We are commanded to remain in hope. Our belief in the higher power requires us to activate that divine mercy and compassion, and never caught into this destructive and toxic hands of hopelessness and despair, and shake up our apathy. And with the, I don't know how anybody can believe in what we believe in Judaism and Islam and can just be sleepy and lazy. How that belief doesn't activate endless energy in people's mind, but somehow we do it. We should fight, if you want to achieve peace, not to take cheap shots at crazies and haters and racists, etc. We have to fight with despair and apathy. And since this is the last time, allow me to also say Shana Tova to all my Jewish brothers and sisters around the world. A happy and blessed and sweet year. And looking forward to our continuing conversations.
Thank you, Abdullah and Randy. So I'm going to quote here from that great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, political activist, who, as you know, marched with King, who said, "Some are guilty, but all are responsible." And we can't run away from that. And if we can all own that, we may not be all guilty, but we're all responsible. That's a place where we can all walk forward from.
Vimru Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Salam, Shalom, and peace. And this is the beginning, and there will be many more conversations. And
Inshallah.
My mentor here, Inshallah, Baruch Hashem, and I hope my mentor here, Rabbi Michael, will continue being a part of it, and my new mentor here, Imam Abdullah, as well. Thank you for joining us in Ramiz, and I will continue doing what we can to keep bringing communities together for peace.
Thank you so much.